There's no doubt Macho Man Randy Savage is one of the all-time greats. He was a household name beginning in the 80s and is still beloved today. There's very little to change in his career. That is, until he left WWF. He gave the big elbow to his past and joined WCW. And yes, there was some good stuff there, but it never really felt like his home. But what if he hadn't left, but instead resumed his in-ring career right there in New York? We find out the result on today's show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rebooking the Territory podcast. This is your host, Luke Thayer. This is the podcast where we go back in time and take those wrestling storylines or wrestlers' careers that didn't quite work out the way we wanted, and we change it into exactly what they should have been. My guest today, he's a pro wrestler. He's the voice of Buzz on WWE 2K19. He's been on Larry King Now. In fact, he has a new podcast, Tough Talk with AJ Kirsch. My guest, repeat offender here, AJ Kirsch.
Thanks for having me, man. And I appreciate you plugging the podcast right off the bat to keep it kind of short and sweet here, because I am super eager to get into rebooking Macho Man's career.
That's who we're rebooking Macho Man today.
That's right. Oh, yeah, you didn't mention it. I'm sorry. I just totally took away your heat, brother. My bad.
No. That's okay. We'll just consider it. I tagged you in on that.
That's right. I got the hot tag. But yeah, Tough Talk with AJ Kirsch. So 10 years ago, I was on a WWE reality show called Tough Enough. And the trainers were Stone Cold Steve Austin, Bill DeMott, Trish Stratus, and Booker T. And it was a competition style reality show where, you know, somebody gets eliminated every week and eventually somebody wins a contract with WWE. And so just being that it's 10 years later and being that as a professional entertainer, I've been very bored over the last year. I'm like, you know what? Everybody else has a podcast. I'm going to start a podcast. Why the hell not?
Absolutely.
So it just launched. Episode 1 is out right now, and you can listen to it everywhere you get your podcasts. Go to thetoughtalkpod.com and just listen on your podcast provider of preference.
Absolutely. And if you're listening to this podcast right now, I know you're a wrestling fan, and I know you remember Tough Enough. Because whether you remember the exact season that AJ was on or not, you remember the whole series. There's been, AJ and I were talking just a little bit before we started. My memory, like I've seen so many clips over the years,
right?
Whether it's Bill DeMott or Billy Gunn or whomever, you know, even some Stone Cold doing some promos with people. Sure. We've seen the clips, and they bring it up occasionally on WWE television.
Yeah.
And so you get to listen to AJ give the inside scoop, what it was like to be a contestant.
Yeah. And as one of the contestants, like I wasn't in on every meeting. I wasn't there with like the producers when they're talking with the trainers, but like, I feel like I have a pretty unique insight, and just in the crazy world of reality television with the equally crazy world of pro wrestling, and just kind of this perfect storm of emotionally charged competition, cringy, like it was something. It was something. And so I'm looking forward to revealing every little detail as much as I'm capable.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to subscribe immediately. I kind of want to just end this podcast now so I can go listen to yours.
Yes.
I'm going to stop talking to you now so I can hear you talk.
Cool. And hey, everybody. Welcome to Rebooking the Territory.
This is your new host, AJ Kirsch. It's completely crazy world. Like entertainment, first of all, is a crazy world. Reality television has kind of pulled back somewhat of the curtain. In some respects, like seeing people who are not actual performers, not obviously now Tough Enough is a little different. Same kind of like Last Comic Standing. You're seeing professionals, whereas there's other shows like Survivor where you're just literally pulling people off the street kind of thing.
Right. Well, Tough Enough kind of had that too. Some people came in with like 5, 6, 7 years of wrestling experience, and some of the contestants couldn't even do a forward roll. Like one of the contestants was Miss USA from that year, and she'd never been in a wrestling ring in her entire life. So it was kind of fun just watching her like, bumbling around when other people were just like banging out bumps and running the ropes. And, between legends like Bret Hart and Rey Mysterio, Big Show, John Cena, Stacy Keibler came by, the Bella Twins came by. Like, there were some top shelf guests on that show too. And getting to be on that show was, I feel like I won a wrestling fan's life lottery, but also just being under that type of microscope and pressure, trying to win a WWE contract was, it was, I don't know. I don't even know. It was crazy. Crazy is the easiest word I can come up with right now, but it was a very trying experience. It puts a stress on a performer. Right.
That I don't think that the general public knows. So even when, like, saying that pulls back the curtain a little bit, it adds a different curtain. Because
absolutely, that's a great way of putting it.
Right. So you're seeing kind of like, oh, here's how things work, but you're not seeing that they're actually manipulating things behind the scenes as well. They're actually running a show.
And I get into that too. Like, the producers definitely, they let as much as they could happen organically. And I don't think, at least Tough Enough doesn't get enough credit for letting a lot happen organically, but there are definitely stories that emerge in not just Tough Enough, but in, because I've done 3 reality shows now. The producers see stories emerging, and then they do their best to subtly massage those stories so that they can flush out something that they think will make for good television. Mm-hmm. And I take a deep dive into that process as well. And I have other contestants on the show. I'm going to be talking with casting agents, the trainers, the medic and I are still in touch. Yeah. Fans, wrestlers that were watching the show as a fan and trying, not really knowing what was going on. So I'm getting as many different angles as possible for this, the 10-year anniversary of season 5 of Tough Enough.
That's pretty amazing because, when I very first started comedy, Last Comic Standing was a show that was on television, and
I remember it. Yeah,
and it was a big deal for certain comics. Like, it propelled certain comics to a different level. They got kind of a contract. They got a contract, I believe, with NBC at the time, like a development deal. So it's a similar type of situation to Tough Enough.
Exactly.
It's not like they're saying, hey, we're strapping a rocket to your back, you're going to be main eventing WrestleMania just because you won Tough Enough. But they're saying, hey, we're going to actually invest some money into you and some time into you. And that's kind of what Last Comic Standing for a lot of comics was. And I auditioned early in my comedy career. Literally, it was my 3rd time on stage.
Wow.
But
why not, though? Why not?
Well, because at that, I don't know how wrestlers feel, but certainly in comedy terms, I essentially hadn't even started comedy yet. I was so new. I didn't understand the process of it yet. And so all I knew was, because of what Last Comic Standing presented themselves as, which was anybody, this could be literally anybody in America could win this thing. I thought, oh, that's what, maybe I'm the one. Maybe this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And after having gone through the experience, like through my audition, I was praying that I would not make it on television. Like, I really was super worried until like the first couple episodes came out that I was going to be in the blooper reel, because it didn't occur to me that like, oh, this might go really poorly.
Right.
Luckily, I was just new. So yes, I was bad, but they also looked at it and go, oh, whatever you just did, you're just so new. There's nothing there to even to critique even. It's like,
oh, that's cute. A little pat you on the head. Like,
right. Yeah. And it's kind of maybe like somebody who might audition for Tough Enough that comes in and they go, hey, take a bump. And they go, well, what's that? They go, oh, okay, I don't think you're ready for this. Yeah.
Right. Or here's how to do the bump, and let's watch you just like knock the air out of yourself and bang your head and everything. And there's definitely that, because they're looking to make compelling television, and train wrecks make for compelling television. So like, you're not going to watch American Idol without seeing William Hung, but William Hung made a career out of it. So good for him. You know what I mean?
Like, you have to be so incredibly bad though. That's the thing I didn't even understand at the time was you have to be that train wreck.
Right.
You have to be either good and they want you. And usually that's because it's been set up by agents and managers. And I didn't realize that at the time. Or you have to be basically a crazy person.
Right.
And they go, oh, this guy dressed up like the devil and is going to make we get to laugh at him. And I was like, which I don't like that part of reality television anyway. I don't know how you feel, but I don't like any sort of thing that I feel like takes advantage of people.
Yeah. I mean, it's not the most redeeming part of it, but that is a part of it. It is watching at home and being like, oh my God, are you seeing this? I'm so glad I'm not them right now. Yeah. Like, which is, it is a part of it. It is.
Yeah, it certainly is part of that. And so, that's, obviously we can't give away too much of your podcast because you want people to subscribe to your podcast, and it's going to be ongoing, and they get to have a lot of behind the scenes.
A lot of insights again. And it's not just my story. I've got a different guest every single time. So we're hearing my angle, their angle, the contestants, the trainers, the casting agents, the executive producers have agreed to be on the show. So we're taking a deep, deep dive, and I can't wait.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
Thanks, man.
That's a very cool thing, because I think people, especially people listening to this podcast, if you're listening to this particular podcast, you're going to be interested in that. So cool. Well, I actually have a podcast that I probably should actually present for our listening audience today, which we are talking about the Macho Man, Randy Savage, absolute legend. And we're actually going to focus specifically on a certain part of his career, which is, let's just say he never left for WCW, kind of like that 94 to 99 thing. And do you have like these memories of Macho Man either pre-WCW or during WCW?
My memories of Macho Man pre-WCW are actually pretty vague. Like, growing up, I was born in 83. So like as a single digit kid in the late 80s and, early 90s, it was hard not to at least be aware of Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage and Andre the Giant, Jake the Snake, and Roddy Piper and all these characters, Ultimate Warrior. So I knew who Macho Man Randy Savage was, but I had not yet been bit by the wrestling bug the way I would be in like 1996. And so by the time I started tuning in, that was one of the things that made it so interesting to me, is because it's like when you say, I'm going to play Nintendo, you mean play video games. But Nintendo was so popular at one point that you just say, I'm going to play Nintendo. Mm-hmm. So when I said, I didn't realize WCW was the thing. So it was always like, oh, I'm watching WWF. I would just refer to pro wrestling as WWF at the time, which is as it was known then. And so when I got back into wrestling when I got deep into wrestling in 1996, I'm like, why is Hulk Hogan and what is WCW? Why is Macho Man here? Like, I recognize these performers, but I don't know why they're not in WWF. And so that just piqued my curiosity and really did bring my interest, and I'm sure a lot of wrestling fans' interest, to WCW to see what was going on over there. So most of my memories of Macho Man are WCW, and I mean, I was going to say beyond, but he really didn't do a whole lot after WCW. I think he did a little bit of a run in TNA, Total Nonstop Action, which
very brief.
Very brief. He popped up like twice or something. Yeah. But he had like that little role in Spider-Man, and then he made a terrible rap album, and then he died. Like, that's pretty much my Macho Man memories were WCW, Spider-Man, be a man, Hogan, and then that was it.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see. Because when it comes to any sort of childhood thing, whether it's wrestling, whether it was Transformers, for me, G.I. Joe, whatever it is, as a child, time is an altered state of reality than what you have as an adult.
Right.
So a year or two can completely change how you view what Macho Man was, who he was. Some people that are a little bit older than me, I'm slightly older than you, but like, people that are older than me, some of them even know this like outlaw wrestler that was Macho Man pre-WWF. His dad, Angelo Poffo, had kind of an outlaw promotion there in Memphis, which was not the Jerry Lawler, version. It was kind of just like going against it, like doing promos against it, one-sided type of thing where it's like, look, we're not going to talk about you because that gives you credence and
right.
credibility. So
don't acknowledge the competition.
Right. And so for Angelo Poffo, it's like, they're talking about the other places, from my understanding, they were running the business out of Angelo Poffo's home.
Okay.
And so, and his big star was one of his sons, was,
Leapin' Lanny Poffo.
Leapin' Lanny was in there, and he kind of always, I don't want to call him a hanger-on because he did have a career, but certainly Macho was the reason that he had,
right,
a large part of his career.
Right.
And so Macho was that guy, and then he kind of went, goes from there basically to WWF, and then gets this big run in WWF. I didn't see any of that.
Did he not play baseball for a hot minute?
Yes, he was a professional baseball player. Like I think he was like maybe AA or AAA, got that far, and then I think he had an injury or just was never quite good enough. I think there was an injury though.
Yeah.
And so he, so that was all pre his wrestling days. But his dad was a wrestler, like a well-known wrestler, and so it kind of probably was always a part of his destiny,
right,
to get into the wrestling business in some way. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like a Jeff Jarrett. In the sense of like, dad being a promoter. Now, obviously, Jerry, as far as I know, was not an actual wrestler. He was just a promoter, but he might have been a wrestler at some point. But that thing where Jeff then becomes a wrestler and a promoter, kind of following the footsteps, because that's what your family knows.
Right. There definitely seems to be a pattern too with, it's a lot of pro wrestling families kind of dot the history of pro wrestling when you're, the Von Erichs, the Guerreros, don't even get me started on the enormous tree that is the Samoan dynasty that includes Dwayne Johnson and Roman Reigns and Yokozuna and the Wild Samoans and Rikishi and just, 3-Minute Warning, who went on to be, let's see, one of them was Roman Reigns' brother, I believe. I think that was Rosie, and Jamal, who would become Umaga. Like they're all connected. Even
I think Nia Jax.
Nia Jax, I think, is in there somewhere.
A cousin in there, it's
Jimmy Snuka, Tamina Snuka, who I think is his daughter. Like it's all.
And Rock's daughter is now signed to Development Deal, so it's like it's going to go on and on.
Right, and I think it goes back to the High Chief Peter Maivia, who was The Rock's grandfather.
I've been watching Young Rock, so I know a little bit about that.
Yeah. So it's there's a lot of the Hart family. My God, I can't believe it took this long to mention the Harts, but there are a ton of wrestling dynasties that again just kind of pepper the history of pro wrestling. And
Vince McMahon himself is part of it.
Right. Vince McMahon, I think, he's actually Vince McMahon Jr. In fact, fun fact, Roddy Piper would always get under his skin because Roddy Piper would call Vince McMahon Jr.
Yeah.
But yeah, Vince McMahon Sr., I think even Vince McMahon Sr.'s father was like a boxing promoter in the 20s or something.
Yeah, maybe boxing and wrestling a little bit. Like, those were kind of intertwined a little bit back in the 20s or
right.
So yeah, you go back to Vince McMahon himself is already third generation. So then you get into like the Shane and the Triple H. And we've just all that generation is now a fourth generation, and they've got kids. Stephanie and Shane both have kids that will probably be in the business as well.
Right. Smart Money says they're going to be fifth generation McMahons running, or at least having some type of influence in WWE.
Sure. Yeah. Unless it gets sold completely and they just all go off and be billionaires.
Right. So this might be a little bit more morbid. What do you think is going to happen when Vince McMahon dies? Because he's got maybe 10 years, 15 years, considering he's a bajillionaire and has access to whatever he needs to like live as long as possible. But people are convinced, and I've heard, I don't think it was Triple H, but I've heard people say Vince is going to die in his chair at Titan Towers. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't expect anything less from Vince McMahon, who is without a doubt the most influential man in the history of professional wrestling. What do you think is going to happen to WWE when he finally succumbs, when he finally does the job to Father Time?
Yeah, I feel like he would still say no job.
Yeah, no job.
No job. So
I'm going over.
Yeah, that's a tough question because I'm guessing, and I don't, obviously I have no firsthand knowledge, there's no connection there. But just the sense I get is even him kind of pulling himself off of television a little bit, not wanting to be the face quite as much, even though he's still got kind of that firm hand and everything.
Right.
I'm guessing that he feels his mortality more than he did 10 or 20 years ago.
I would think so. I mean, he's creeping up on 80. Like he's not a young buck anymore.
No, he's certainly, I know he was on the cover of Men's Fitness or Men's Health.
Right, with his traps up to here and a chain.
And that was 70 in that picture. And you go, all right. I mean, obviously he's in great shape for his age.
Right.
But there's at some point the body just changes to go, you know what, maybe I don't need to hit this quite as hard, or, there's going to be a point where I think he wants to enjoy whatever last bit of time is there. And it's different when you are 40 or 50 or even 60 and you just think, I got lots of years ahead. If you're 70, 80, you might be just going, maybe a succession plan needs to be in place. So,
right. And I'm sure he has one, but I wince because you're talking about Vince as if he's a normal human, like as if he's going to be in a rocking chair next to a lake watching the sunset. Like he's a different breed. I've met him once in passing and not nearly enough to say that I know the guy, but I know people who know the guy, and they say that his work ethic, his workout regimen, like he lives to run WWE and to work out. And like, I think he will enjoy his final years the most doing what he's been doing for the past 50 or however long he's been the owner of what was WWF, then WWF, and now WWE.
I think that's what everyone says that knows him. There's just an element of surprise, I think, that will be in it. And this is just my gut reaction because there's people like Bobby Knight, who I'm from Indiana. He was a great coach in Indiana.
Right, I remember him. He was a bit of a basket case there for a little while.
He certainly was, and he's 80 now. He hasn't coached for 10 years or so, but also Dean Smith was like this. But also Roy Williams, who coaches North Carolina basketball, just retired. These guys kind of just retire out of the blue. You go, these guys are lifers. They're never going to give they're so passionate and they're so into it. And then at some point, it's not the same business that they were in 30 years ago. Like it just has changed around them that they go, I'm not the person for this anymore. Right. It's just, I don't get what I used to get because everything has changed. And my gut feeling about that says at some point Vince will wake up and go, this isn't the same thing that I created in 1984 or 85. This is not, creating WrestleMania or going public even, or creating these next stars. Now it is, I'm making TV deals. Great. Right. I'm selling my product, which is great, for $1 billion to Peacock or $1 billion to Fox. All right, we got these $1 billion deals, but now I'm making business deals. I'm not creating anymore. That's just my gut feeling, is that at some point you will wake up and go, this is not what I was so passionate about for 40 years. It's just a different thing.
Right.
But hey, then again, everyone else around him says, nope, he's going to die in that chair.
He's going to die in the chair. Right. Well, I mean, I don't want to, I was about to say I'm looking forward to it. I'm not. That's not what I mean to imply. Like, it's going to be a very sad day when it finally happens. And I don't even know that, I don't know that I should have even asked, because like I said, it's kind of morbid, but I am just kind of like, and I think most of the wrestling community is just like, what happens when it happens?
I think the stockholders are thinking that too. Like, what happens?
Sure.
that man is WWE.
Right. Right. It is his lifeblood, and I can't even fathom how many lives his vision and his ambition have changed over the years. What the hell would we be talking about right now if not Macho Man Randy Savage?
We'd be talking Bobby Knight is what we'd be talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting because, like, bringing up Vince McMahon, that really kind of brings us back to Macho Man.
Well done.
Right, because Vince McMahon kind of being the dictator of wrestling at the time in 93-ish, 94, basically told Macho, you're done wrestling.
Right.
You're done. And Macho Man, at that time, I believe he was 40, 41 maybe. And you say, certainly when I was 12, that seemed ancient.
Of course.
Like that, he seemed like the old, a 40-year-old seems like a 90-year-old. It's all the same.
Right.
But and as an adult, you go, AJ Styles, I think now is 44 or something like that.
Yep. I think Randy Orton's not far behind him. And
he's close.
He's still doing great. Yeah.
Right. It's kind of like if you told Randy Orton right now, because I think he's about the age Macho Man was, you're done. No more wrestling for you. You're just done.
Yeah.
You've hit it. And maybe that's part of Vince McMahon being in his 70s now and seeing Randy Orton as a young man as opposed
That's an interesting take. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, because Macho Man at the time, they probably would have been similar age, close,
Probably.
There's probably a little bit of like, look, buddy, I'm not getting in that ring. You're not getting in that ring type of thing. Even though Vince went on to be in the ring in his 50s, he denied Macho that. And so this is a question I have for you. This is a specific, as a professional wrestler, age comes to us all, but just to have somebody tell you're a few years behind Macho Man and when he had to quit. But if somebody came to you in the next couple of years and said, you know what, you're done, bud. Why don't you just go talk about wrestling and no more in ring, no more action, whatever you've been passionate about for a decade, 2 decades. Sorry, I don't see it anymore. And you just have to live with that.
Well, I would feel fine about that because my contributions to wrestling are most like 90% vocal at this point. Mm-hmm. But what you just said though about if somebody were to take that away from me and just be like, hey, you know what? We don't think you have the energy, the enthusiasm. You're just not keeping up as much. And we're going to call it for you. You're done. Mm-hmm. I would be pretty pissed. I would not be happy. I would be, all right, well, I guess my work is no longer needed here, but you know what? I bet there's a place out there that could still use me the way that I'd like to be used. So I would probably do the exact same thing that Macho did and just start entertaining other offers and working elsewhere. I do think, though, that especially in wrestling, which can be such a carefully curated performance in a way that can protect people who are past their prime, that it does get abused a little bit too much. I think there are some performers out there who definitely stuck around longer than they should have. I think there are some people who are not even in the ring anymore that are sticking around far longer than they should have and are not doing the product any favors in doing so. But when you're talking about a legend like Macho Man or like, The Undertaker had a string of less than stellar matches toward the twilight of his career. Who's going to be the person, if not Vince McMahon, to pull you aside and be like, hey, man, it's time?
Yeah. Well, which is funny to me because I don't know what that relationship with Randy Savage was.
Right.
Because to say that at 40 years old, and then to look at what happens afterwards, where you have Ric Flair in a WWE ring into his late 50s, early 60s, to see Undertaker, who's now getting close to 60, who you saw Shawn Michaels. He pulled Shawn Michaels out of retirement to go do a Saudi Arabia thing in his 50s. And
that's one of the matches I was talking about that was just an absolute train wreck.
Yes.
Train wreck.
Now, to be fair to Shawn Michaels, if he had not stopped wrestling and had just been wrestling this entire time, that might have been a different type of match than coming back out of the blue at his age to do it.
I think so, but there were also just some freak accidents. Like Triple H tore his pec like 5 minutes into the match. Kane got punched in the head and lost his wig and his mask. It just fell off his head.
Yeah.
It was just bad. It was just bad. And that breaks my heart a little bit, no pun intended, because Shawn Michaels had the perfect send-off story, the perfect ride off into the sunset story against The Undertaker in the main event of WrestleMania. It could not have been written any more beautifully, but he still comes back. He has a fart in church of a match. I'm sure he got paid literally millions of dollars. I'm sure he got paid, probably like $4 or $5 million to do that match. So who's going to
have money?
The Saudis have money, right? And that was a bought show. It didn't matter how many tickets they sold. That was a bought show, bought and paid for. So, I probably would have done the same thing, but there is no perfect exit in wrestling, and that was it. And it is no longer the perfect exit. So that just breaks my heart a little bit.
It does. Not to dwell on that too much longer, but
right. We could go on so many tangents too. It's already like we're 30 minutes into this thing already. We haven't even gotten to Macho Man.
We haven't even got to him hardly, but that, it kind of still comes back to is going, all right, you look at these guys, like even Hogan coming back in the 2000s and had a run again, and he's older, and it didn't happen for Macho Man. So I know in stand-up comedy, from the moment you start doing stand-up comedy, you're consistently being told no. Like you're being told, nope, you can't do this. You're not going to perform here. We're not interested in you. And you have to go out and find audiences and prove yourself and get better with whomever you can perform for. And
same.
Right. And so at some point you hope that the person that told you no wants you at some point, or that you're big enough. You're like, I don't need you at all.
Right.
And so I just can feel that in Macho Man. I'm just going, he'd been in WWF at that time, probably a decade or so.
Yep.
And probably thought this is going to be my forever home. And maybe that's what Vince thought too. And maybe Vince took him a little for granted. Like, look, you're part of the family here, and you're going to be, I can't think of some of the folks' names that he kept around, but there was people that he kept kind of on payroll, that
like a Harvey Whippleman, or a Brooklyn Brawler,
people that he just kept around for decades,
right?
Because they're part of the family. And it's not, there's certainly people that stuck around for decades and they were contributing a lot. Then there's some people who it's like, well, you were my dad's chauffeur or my dad's partner, and so you're going to be taken care of for the rest of your life because I'm loyal in that way. Right. So maybe Vince took him for granted a little bit there, just going, look, he'll just do whatever I tell him. Let's put him in the booth or whatever. We'll find a way to use him. Right. But clearly with his WCW run, he had at least another 5 years in him.
Oh, for sure.
In ring, he was a top guy in WCW. They treated him like a top guy. He won the world championship. He was with the NWO. He was up against the NWO. He has matches with Ric Flair. Does DDP. A lot of DDP helps DDP get over even more. Right. I'm going to take the diamond cutter, bro. That moment type of thing. And so I feel for him in this situation because I'm guessing he did not want to leave. And I think we got some great creative out of him though. Like, as we can see, he was not unwilling to change. Like, even the pictures, most people are just listening to this. They're not going to be seeing this. But I've got a couple pictures of Macho Man as my background here. And both of them one is like kind of late WWF, the cowboy hat, early WCW when he first comes in, that kind of the Macho Madness, neon colors version. But that's not even, when I first started watching him, he was the Macho King. That's when I first saw him. Right. And before that, he was the Macho Man with the stars and just kind of these almost homemade robes.
The ski goggles.
And then when he's in WCW, there's like, you can see another picture of kind of like the NWO, the black and white, but he didn't just stick with that. At some point he slicks his hair back, he gets earrings, and
right.
when he's close to 50 years old, he's
got like a mesh tank top with madness on it, which and just juiced out of his head. He had a run in WCW. He went away for a while, and then he came back, and he was just always sweaty, like impossibly tan, and just bigger physically as far as muscularity than I've ever seen him in his entire life. Like,
absolutely.
And there's no way he could have done that without, I have air quotes up right now for the listeners, a little help.
Yeah, some vitamins.
Some vitamins. That's right.
Yeah, and and my guess, as he'd been, he probably was at least on some sort of testosterone replacement therapy.
I would think.
At least. But yeah, he was jacked, like even on his way out, like his last, promo of his career almost, he's wearing like almost like a red tuxedo, red hat, no shirt, and he's with Gorgeous George. He had been with Gorgeous George for a couple of years, and willing to change with the times.
Right.
And so for Vince McMahon to not see that this guy is willing to change with the times, it's almost like he just saw him as like, nah, kids aren't going to relate to this guy anymore. And yet they did.
Well, I think there's one thing in asking a change in look. Like a makeover is never a bad idea when you're an entertainer, especially like, you almost want to make a point to change when people are loving what you're doing the most. So that way it either gives them something to want again in the future, or it gives you a chance to just reinvent yourself. So he wasn't afraid of reinventing his look, as we see now with, as I'm looking at this NWO Madness on my right and EDC 2022 on my left. But I think his heart was still in wrestling. And I think he felt like he was in the doghouse, or like, go to your room, and his room was the commentary booth. I don't think he wanted to be there. I don't think he was done with the physicality of pro wrestling. Yeah.
And I've heard Bruce Pritchard say before that Macho Man behind the scenes was saying, I've got to get out of the ring. I'm tired of this thing. And, which clearly he probably, like any of us, there's probably moments where he's just like, I'm tired. My body hurts. And taking maybe just give him 6 months off, go get better, get right. And then he probably been like, I got to get back in the ring. Cause you hear Ric Flair, you hear these guys of that era talk like, oh, you just want to get off the road. And 10 hours later, you're like, I got to get back on the road, And so that's all he knew. And so even if he was saying that behind the scenes, I'm sure there was at some point a conversation of, okay, I'm ready to get back. And that was denied.
Sure.
Because if it wasn't denied, I highly doubt, and I could be wrong here, highly doubt that his first thought was, I'm going to jump to WCW to resume my in-ring career.
Right.
My guess is that he would have that conversation with Vince first. And so as we start to rebook it, because there's no reason to go over his WCW career really, because that he had a lot of good years. But what if he had resumed it in WWF instead of going to WCW? And so that basically starts in 1994. And I think you've seen probably some of the roster at that time. What do we do with him to pull him out of the booth? Because I know what he wanted at the time was Shawn Michaels. Right.
And he wanted to make a star out of Shawn Michaels. Mm-hmm. And this wasn't even the Shawn Michaels, the showstopper, the headliner, the main event, the icon. This was like the best mullet in wrestling, Shawn Michaels. Yeah. This was Shawn Michaels like walking out of the Castro at 12:30 in the morning, looking like a village person, Shawn Michaels. Yeah. Like with the, how do you even describe his look? I don't know how to describe his look. It's like, Google it. Just Google Shawn Michaels 1994, and you're just going to be like, oh, okay, I see. But the in-ring work would have been so good. It would have been so good. Shawn was just starting to come into his own as a singles competitor. Randy Savage, ever since his match with Rick Steamboat at WrestleMania 3, which was magnificent, by the way. To this day, many people call it the best match in WrestleMania history. The match alone and the psychology and making what they do make sense. And they're both, Shawn Michaels was a great face as one half of the Rockers. He was definitely stepping into his own as a heel. Macho was great in either role. And Shawn Michaels would eventually go on to be this mega star. But imagine how his career could have been catapulted with a 6-month or year-long program with Macho Man. It would have been amazing.
Oh, absolutely. Because, even just looking like at the scenery at the time in WWF, 1994, we're still only doing 5 pay-per-views a year.
Oh, that's right.
Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, King of the Ring, SummerSlam, and Survivor Series. And that's it. And even some of those you go, like King of the Ring was I liked it, but it was kind of a step down from the other pay-per-views. Also, Survivor Series was kind of this Thanksgiving tradition, but it wasn't the same thing that we see now where, at the time it was like 4-on-4s, 5-on-5s, Survivor.
Right. And that was every match. Match. It wasn't just, a bunch of 1-on-1 matches, a tag team match. And then for tradition's sake, it would be like a 4-on-4 or 5-on-5.
Right. And then the Royal Rumble, I will go to my grave calling the Royal Rumble match the Royal Rumble. And
yes.
And that is the Royal Rumble pay-per-view, if you're going to add that suffix. And so, but that is what it is. It's a big battle royal. And so really you had WrestleMania and SummerSlam. Those were the two big
tent
poles. This is where our storylines, we had the one-on-ones, where we have stories wrapping up. That's where you're going to see a lot of that. And big time storylines. That's where we saw things like Match Made in Hell, Match Made in Heaven, Macho Man getting married and Jake the Snake coming in. And, obviously the WrestleMania moments that we saw with Macho Man of winning the tournament or, the Steamboat type matches. So things that you remember, you're going to remember from those. And there's only really 2 of those. And so, with the exception of like Royal Rumble, obviously there's a Ric Flair has his moment there, but
that's the Rumble match though.
Yes, that's the Royal Rumble match. And the King of the Ring really only has a couple of those ever in its entire history. It's kind of like, obviously Stone Cold is the king, with pun intended, of the King of the Ring moments. And so as we see that, you go, man, if he's doing that with Shawn Michaels in that 94 slot, they're going to have either a WrestleMania match or a SummerSlam match. And if they have a SummerSlam match, they might even have another match at Survivor Series in a team and then have a blow off or something like that in WrestleMania.
Right.
WrestleMania 11. And that would have been, WrestleMania 11, I just did a podcast on that. It's not a good WrestleMania. And so
it's one of the worst.
One of the worst. So if you can imagine WrestleMania 11 instead of, I'll just look back where Shawn Michaels was in that.
Diesel for the title.
Right.
But would Macho versus Shawn though really have been the difference maker in that match to make it the marquee event that we're so used to seeing out of WrestleMania?
Well, this is the thing.
Okay.
And I kind of talked about this in the podcast with Dan St. Germain about WrestleMania 11. Once you start moving a few pieces around, it changes the dynamic because now you don't have Diesel Shawn Michaels. If you have Shawn Michaels Macho Man, so now Diesel has to go with somebody. So now does Diesel go with Bret Hart instead of going against Bob Backlund? And then if that's the case, do you still have any sort of Bob Backlund storyline, or is he gone? And then does that Diesel go to Undertaker and then Bret Hart go with somebody else? Does that start changing how you want to deal with Jeff Jarrett and Razor Ramon? Or is Lex Luger still going to be in a tag team? Or does that change the dynamics where you're like, let's keep him single for break up that whole Allied Powers thing and have Luger against Briscoe. Like once you start, it's kind of like that butterfly effect. Once you start changing one thing, it can have an effect on the entire card.
Are we not changing Bam Bam versus Lawrence Taylor?
Well,
is that one set in stone?
Well, the unfortunate thing about that one is because I would change it. I wouldn't have it. First of all, I'm not a Bam Bam Bigelow fan. He just didn't ever connect with me as a kid.
Okay.
I don't know what it was, whether it was the flame. I feel like it's the flames. Like, I feel like if he just didn't wear this skin tight bodysuit with flames on it, if it had been some other look, like maybe more like a biker or something, it would have gone over better with me. Cause seeing, sculpted fat is kind of called that.
I see what you're saying. So you would have wanted more like a one-man gang type of thing.
Maybe something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Which obviously it worked for him and he had a career with it, but it always felt like there was something holding him back. And part of it for me as a kid was he didn't look scary enough to be scary with that suit on.
Right.
And he wasn't going to be a guy that I thought of as, he's not a baby face, so I'm not cheering for him. So
he looks like a monster.
Right. And he's too good and too talented to be that. But you're not going to get rid of that because Lawrence Taylor. So there's no way that they're going to give up that money and that all the eyeballs they're going to get. I wish they could, but I can just know that's one of those. I know it would be vetoed immediately if you're like, I don't want this guy.
It's an attraction.
Right. I think it does make for one of the worst parts of, the pay-per-view in general, like that WrestleMania 11, but the whole thing's a mess.
Yeah.
So go back and for those listening that haven't heard of you, go back and listen to that WrestleMania 11 and see how we fixed everything. but Macho Man was not part of that because he was not in the company at the time when we rebooked it. But for this, I think that might change the dynamics of that because Diesel can be champion still and going up against some people, and Shawn Michaels can be going against the Macho Man. It doesn't necessarily have to be that because he could be finishing that up full in 1994.
But on paper though, like Macho Man, Shawn Michaels, Diesel, Bret Hart, like that's enough to get, I think, anybody's attention in that era. And that would make, not that Diesel Shawn doesn't, because both of them they're best friends. They're both super talented. The match wasn't that good though. It really wasn't. And I feel like, I don't know whose fault that was. I don't know that it's anybody's fault really, because there are some times where you have two people in a ring and they're just not gelling for whatever reason. That one could argue that's why Hogan and Flair didn't happen, is because they just weren't meshing the way Vince would have liked to see. But Macho Man, and here's the thing too, is that Macho Man is so, in my mind anyway, even though he did have a great run in the late 90s and in the very early part of 2000, 2001, he's still such a fixture in late 80s, early 90s WWF that for him to stick around into 95, 96, 97, and even into the Attitude Era would have been a bridging of generations that would have made for some very intriguing attractions.
Absolutely. And I think Macho Man could have been a unique guy, because it was going to be very difficult for Hogan to be that guy for WWF because he had made so much money for the company being a babyface. Right. But Macho Man was not in that category. He had been a heel. He had been a babyface. He can do both equally well. And there's very rarely do you see those type of characters. Obviously, we see Hogan go on to be one of the greatest heels of all time. Right. But we didn't know that at the time. And so it's tough to go, well, let's just kill off this, golden goose here.
Right. And Macho Man's erratic enough too. His character, which is in large part who he was in real life, very nervous, very paranoid, very anxious, it's believable that he could be a heel or a babyface at the drop of a hat. He could, snap at the smallest little thing and the crowd would believe that he had a completely different turn of change of heart just because of, somebody was looking at Miss Elizabeth a little cross-eyed. I didn't like it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have a Macho Man impression? Do you have one?
Oh yeah, everyone's got a little bit, right? It's
Nice,
not,
yeah.
mine's not the cream of the crop,
Yeah.
but
It's enough to get you a cup of coffee in the big time.
yeah, obviously there's some great Macho Mans out there, but like,
Yeah. If you need a YouTube wormhole to go down, just type in Macho Man promos and you're going to be treated to some gold.
oh, they're great. It's my. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and I'm wearing a Macho Man shirt now, and she's gotten into Macho Man.
Nice.
And so she likes Macho Man. She thinks she's her favorite. She doesn't really know anything about wrestling, really, but she knows Macho Man. Oh. And she's 3. I mean, he's been dead for 10 years or something like that now. And,
yeah, long time.
In fact, she even asked about him today. Where is he? And I go, well, I'm sorry, he's passed away. And she's like, he's passed away for pretend. Like, but but in real life, he's not. And I was like, okay, I guess.
Oh God, Santa's going to be an easy discussion. The heartbreak is going to come from telling her that Macho Man's dead for real.
Yeah, and so it's funny to just see though, like this character though can bridge generations, like a decade. I mean, this is now he hasn't wrestled in 2 decades,
right?
And she knows some of his promos. It's just a character that connects with kids because he's memorable, and he connects with adults because he's real. And so, I want that Shawn Michaels thing. I think that beginning thing can really help Shawn Michaels get off to a fun start to his career.
Yeah.
And give him an extra push. And I think that even as we're going in through 95, there's some people that I see him having the ability to have some great matches with. And, even if we start sticking to the pay-per-view schedule, once we hit 95, that's when they introduced In Your House.
Right.
And Macho Man,
monthly pay-per-view.
The monthly pay-per-view. And Macho Man doesn't have to be part of every one of those. I think he's one of those guys where you can bridge the gap. I think the Out of Retirement is kind of that first storyline. The Shawn Michaels thing where Shawn Michaels is the new kid on the block. He's very arrogant. He's into himself. He does a little slap of the commentator, Macho Man, or puts him down a little bit.
Maybe just the finger in the face too, and saying like, you don't deserve to be out here. You don't know what you're talking about anymore.
Right.
Something where he's poking fun that Macho Man is like behind the times at this point.
Right. You can't, I like the finger point, like just right in his chest. Like, you don't even deserve to talk about me because you can't get in this ring and do anything. You're a all retired guy. I'm the young guy, kind of almost playing off of the real personalities behind the scenes.
100%. Because Shawn would turn out to be in real life an arrogant prick. He was, Triple H would always describe him as the angry young man. He just had a lot of this just angst and anger, but nobody could touch him in the ring. He really was that good. But for him to be out here like, you don't even deserve to be at this table right now calling my matches. Ooh. Getting chills just thinking about it.
I know, that would be great, right? And Macho Man is a guy that I think, as much as the Clique had power or whatever, behind the scenes, and how temperamental Shawn Michaels was known to be, is he really going to be temperamental with Randy Savage? I don't think there's a lot of people that were temperamental with Randy Savage behind the scenes.
I think you're right, but I think Shawn was arrogant and pilled up enough at the time to think that he could be. Maybe,
and there are certain people that, you go through life, and maybe this is not a proper adult way to look at things, but there's some people you just go, they needed to be punched in the mouth. Like, they need to be punched in the mouth, and it would have changed their trajectory in life in a positive way. And I think Shawn Michaels is a guy, say it to Randy Savage, and he's going to punch you in the mouth, and you're never going to say it to him again.
Right.
Right. And
when you've got the guy who cornered Jake the Snake to make the snake bite Jake before it was going to bite him to prove that it was devenomized, you don't want to mess with that guy.
Yeah, you're not going to. So you're not going to. And I think Randy loved the business enough that he's like, he's going to put Shawn over. He's going to make him look great. He's going to give him that push. And so there's no way that he's going to, in the ring or, any promo sort of way, take liberties with the guy. So I think they probably would have had good chemistry. there.
I think so too. And I also think, speaking of the Clique, I would have paid good money to see Macho Man Randy Savage against not just Scott Hall, but specifically Razor Ramon. Because there's just there's so much bravado, and, you know, you could say, yeah, there was macho, but now there's machismo, which was Razor Ramon's thing. Oozing machismo. Like, I don't know. I feel like those characters would have made for some very interesting television.
You know what? I like that. I like the idea of him losing to Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels getting over on him, a very close call. So like maybe we have that SummerSlam match, maybe it's close, or we
think it's a dirty finish.
But then that WrestleMania one, I want Shawn Michaels to go over clean there. And for all those wrestling fans out there that don't know, go over clean.
Oh no, I was gonna let you take it because it reminded me of last time when I was like, oh, by the way, I'm your glossary today.
Yes, that's right. I was setting you up.
You're setting me up. Okay, I was about to say ish, but I stopped myself. So going over is wrestling jargon for getting the win. Going over means getting the win. Doing the job means losing, which is why earlier I was like, Vince McMahon is ultimately gonna have to do the job to Father Time.
There we go. And going over clean,
without cheating. Usually with your finishing move in the middle of the ring, no chicanery, no question about who won. Going over clean means a decisive victory.
Yeah, no dusty finishes.
Right. And a dusty finish is when the match ends and the bell rings and everybody thinks somebody has won, but then it's like another referee comes out and says, no, I saw somebody cheat, or his leg was on the rope. Gives a reason to restart the match. And then usually the finish happens in the opposite direction, which is oftentimes in whatever the fans are preferring at that time. So like bad guy wins, cheating, referee comes out, restart the match, good guy wins, yay, baby's in the air, and everybody goes home happy.
See, there we go. That's what I wanted to make sure our audience got from you, because I think I got messages last time about how much they enjoyed that. So
cool.
I wanted to make sure we had a little bit of that in this.
I'm glad you threw that in there. It's always a joy to kind of like review those wrestling terms, because a lot of them were kind of weird.
It's carny talk in a lot of ways. So
it is. Well, wrestling was born on the carnival, so
yeah, I feel
surprising.
Like we're all in that same weird world of entertainment, that corner of entertainment, the corner.
We are. There's the jester over here. There's the bearded lady over here. There's a strong man over here. It's all a lot closer than people might give it credit for.
Absolutely, and we're all on reality television now. So
yeah, exactly.
We've got that. We've got him going over clean over Macho Man. So that kind of, and I like maybe an introspective Macho Man in this afterwards of like, maybe I am done. Maybe I shouldn't have come out of retirement. And on the heels of that, I love the machismo thing of like, almost like, you're right. You don't have machismo anymore. I have the machismo. You need to go back to the booth, or you need to go do something else. And I like the idea of almost like a Rocky coming out of up against Clubber Lang, where it's like, I've already lost, and now
he's not down. We want to see him get back up.
Right. And so having like kind of this change of heart of going in that. So those matches with Razor Ramon are where he gets his macho back. He's not just a man. He's the Macho Man. And I like seeing him, because you can spend most of 95 or a lot of 95. Because if April is that WrestleMania 11 where I have him with Shawn Michaels. You can spend the rest of the year. It's a bunch of in your houses and a SummerSlam doing him getting his macho back. And I think that's the change in the character then of like, whether he wins or loses, he gets his macho back out of that. So then going into 96, I see a darker character, almost like he was doing in WCW, almost like he went NWO then, but like, I like the idea of, and this is almost around the same time, because 96 we've got the NWO starting.
Sure.
There.
So you think this machismo the macho, right? Randy got his groove back. Randy got Randy's Macho Man again. In my head, I was thinking more like on your background here, the colorful cowboy hat, tassels, like bigger and brighter than ever. So I'm curious as to why you envisioned a darker Macho Man.
Well, I think of him darker after all the Razor Ramon stuff is done, because Razor Ramon's kind of bright as well. So they're kind of like both these bright, colorful characters of the time. And it's, you know, and Scott Hall's heading over to WCW right at that
so you're
time
saying it's a darker Macho Man going into the feud, like he's sad, he lost his mojo, he after this thing with Shawn Michaels, he might be brooding a little bit, or you know, doing all that self-reflection. So maybe I understood incorrectly, it's a darker Macho Man that's going up against the bright and oozing machismo Razor Ramon.
I kind of see him leaving that feud, becoming darker, of like,
I see.
So there's something in that feud that snaps him into a darker place, that he doesn't have to get the bright colors back to get his macho back, because part of what has made him so important over the years and so devastating as a in-ring performer is that he changes and that he's willing to go with the times, and he got stagnant, and so he almost in those type of Rocky train scenes, it's like, I have to reshape my mind and body, and part of it is coming out looking differently. So like maybe your first couple times that they meet up, you know, because I like when there's a feud that it isn't just one match. I agree. You know,
tell a long story. Let's see some characters change over the course of this feud.
Right. And so by the end, like the blow off match, that last one, I see him going into that one, coming out of the tunnel, and he just looks different. You're like, oh, this is a different look. And then after he, you know, maybe it's a no holds barred match. You know, I'm sure that you could call it some sort of like Cuban
Miami street fight. Yeah, exactly.
Or something like that, where it's
a madness match.
You know, I'm sure they'll want macho in there, machismo.
Right.
So it's on the line where who can be the most macho out of this, who can take the most punishment, get beat with the strap more times, whatever it is. And then he goes to that dark place, and Razor's going to be kind of like, at this time, I think he's more of a baby face, really. And so I think that can send Macho into that heel territory. Now he's the elder statesman, but he's a dark character, maybe doing some of those earrings, the shirts, because he's got the creativity to go, I'm now wearing black, I'm now in this dark place, and you can have him. And this is where I maybe see him going, no, you can go completely different than this. But I see him having that snap, you know, where the madness, he's now in the madness, not just macho. And somebody that I think would be a perfect in that world of madness is Psycho Sid.
Ooh, that's a good one. I like that pairing. I like that. Yeah. Are they side by side, or are they standing across from each other?
Well, I think that I would probably, I'm more into Macho Man staying a one-on-one thing, but I do think that it's something where you could almost do a little bit of mega powers type of thing.
They got each other's back. Yeah.
They got each other's back. Oh, this is the only guy that understands me because we're both in the mental place, man.
I like that.
And then there's something along the line where Sid does him dirty or something like that. And then, you know, you can kind of have that baby face turn back, because Macho can go back and forth and have that turn where he's coming back to the light. And because Psycho Sid did him dirty, and it's like, he's not going to do someone else the way he was done.
Right. I love that. Like, I think that would also make for some very compelling television. And I don't know that we've ever seen Sid and Macho on the same page. And those two could be very, very dangerous when they are kind of like lurking in the shadows when the other is in the ring. But I could also see it working the other way, where maybe Razor is the heel and he's trying to like kick a Macho Man while he's down and just say, you know, you couldn't hang with Shawn. You definitely can't hang with me. And then I could see that almost being where, let's see, I've got like a bunch of thoughts happening here at once, where maybe Macho, I see how it works the way you were describing it, where Macho goes, if Razor's a face and Macho's a heel, he's sending a message to Razor and doesn't care what the fans think, just so he can feel better about himself, that he can still hang, and that he goes to some dastardly lengths to maybe prove that. But I could also see Razor getting himself over as a heel by kicking the legend while he's down, saying you don't have it anymore, and Macho finding that machismo again, but using it to like get that Rocky, get, like you were saying, it was like get that Rocky thing back, but head more towards the light than going more towards a darker character. And if that was the case, then as we're heading into 96, I could see, maybe it's too soon because Shawn Michaels was the big baby face, like coming up at the time and challenging for the title at WrestleMania and everything. But I don't know. Who is Razor feuding with at the time? I think Razor was feuding with Goldust, which you and I covered on the last episode I was on. And it'd be weird. Goldust was a heel, though. I don't know. I'm getting lost now. I did not think this out very well.
It's all right. I like all of that. Like, this thing is like, obviously there's a couple different directions you can go. Like, even while you were talking, I was just thinking, man, there's the possibility of that Sid is the catalyst for him beating, like him coming on like, I'm psycho and what you need to be is mad. You need to be in the madness. You need to embrace the madness. You need to come in, and that's what turns him a little darker to go over to Scott, go over on Scott Hall. And that there's also another guy that's going to be coming in the company right about this time that fits the crazy character, and that is Mankind. Right. So there's you could almost have a stable of crazy.
The unstable.
Oh, there you go.
The unstable.
Yeah. And I think that's something Macho Man, because then he doesn't have to be in the ring every time.
Right.
He doesn't have to be working every time. Psycho Sid doesn't have to be in the ring every time, if he's got a softball game or whatever he needs to get to. and
Mankind can't wait to get in there, so he'll wrestle 3 times a night if he has to.
Exactly. And then because Mankind's a darker character, you can kind of bring that darker version of Macho Man, kind of like we saw in the NWO and WCW. And Psycho Sid can be, he was a dark character at times too. Also, Psycho Sid kind of got over with the fans too, and so did Mankind, and so did Macho. I think they just all could be in that realm of like, okay, they're dark, but we like them, and starting to get into that attitude.
Right.
They can
and any one of them could be the reason that one of the others becomes a babyface. Like Sid and Mankind could be the ones that are like pushing Macho Man just a little bit too far, and Macho's starting to feel conflicted. Same with Macho and Sid. They could do that same thing to Mankind, and Mankind, who we've later found out deep down does have a heart. In fact, it's painted on his chest. Or, as you said, the fans were starting to feel Sid toward the later part of 96. I would imagine they could feel Sid even more if Mankind and Macho Man were pushing Sid to lengths he didn't want to go. And then all of a sudden, the big man stands up against Macho and Mankind.
Yeah. And you can have a full 6 months of, first of all, teasing them and going against, and then you have another 6 months of the pairing, Mankind versus Sid versus Macho. Maybe at some point you have a 3-way match. Because they're so crazy or whatever, and that gets you all through 96 there. And now we're starting to get into 97, and really, I view 97, 98, 99 kind of in the almost not 1 year, but kind of in the same stage of his career.
Yeah, I agree. And also this stage in the business, it really was pro wrestling's adolescence. It's when it went from this cute little, happy-go-lucky tweener to the badass foul-mouthed teenager who was just like flipping everybody off and telling everyone to suck it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And everyone's for life and all that stuff.
Right. And I think that he works as part of a stable. Like, he could fill a couple different roles.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't. I think he can be a great opponent for both Steve Austin and The Rock on the way
100%.
up. Kind of like the intercontinental level of them. Because they weren't winning. I don't think that Stone Cold won the championship until 98. So
Correct.
You can have in 97 of like intercontinental. It can kind of maybe take some of, because he had that neck injury. If he's doing some stuff with Macho instead of doing stuff with Owen, maybe they're not taking the same risks. So maybe there's not that same high flyer-ness to those matches. He could do stuff with The Rock, kind of putting him over, kind of helping him with that intercontinental level. And it's a weird point in this era, because the Intercontinental Championship still meant a lot, and it meant worker, and it meant you're on your way up. You're a launching pad. And so it still can be a main event on house shows or certain pay-per-views. It doesn't have to be just the world championship, although that's eventually what they're going to want. And he's not going to be that guy anymore.
Right.
But he can get involved with DX, because if Rick Rude could be there and not get in the ring, Macho Man could be that guy where that I picture him with the slick back hair, that he'd changed the sunglasses to be more 1999, 1998, tight shirt, dark tan, multiple earrings, gorgeous George, because he can come up with that anyway. That version of Macho Man fits very well with the DX version, and I think that's where it can kind of wrap up his career, kind of being a guy that, a little bit of an enforcer, a little bit of a guy that could come and have a match here and there, or be in a tag team, or, just be in a run-in, those type of things. He doesn't have to be the every night in-ring performer.
And enough time has passed too that I could see him actually forming some type of bond or friendship with Shawn Michaels, who was, the leader of DX until his exit in March of 98. Mm-hmm. There comes a point, I think, when two wrestlers have been in a company for so long, but also who have feuds in the past that are just like, I don't like you, but I respect you. Yes. That kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And I could see Shawn, even though he is a heel, like appreciating that from somebody who is as illustrious and well decorated as Randy Savage.
Absolutely. And so, and I'm thinking, now I don't see him going much beyond 99, because he didn't in WCW either. He kind of was done by 99.
Right.
But if you kind of have him just part of the company still, maybe now he's doing a little commentary, or he's doing like a
commissioner. I could see him being a commissioner.
A great commissioner, right? And I even see his retirement match being when the NWO comes in 2002 and you have Hogan, because now they don't have that love-hate relationship of the past years. It's just been, I haven't even seen the guy now in 5-6 years.
Right.
So they can maybe work together and actually do some business and not have that animosity, and have like a babyface Randy versus NWO Hogan can kind of put him over right before he's, going to go on against The Rock and everybody else.
Right.
And kind of be his final, farewell, is maybe that one last, I'm not the commissioner tonight, I'm going against you, Hogan, and then puts him over and kind of lets that be that swan song. That's the way I see it, where he hadn't wrestled for a couple years. That's his swan song. He's still in shape enough. He can do it. Kind of like the TNA thing, comes in for a week or two. So that's the way I envision it. So
I could see it working out a similar way, where it's like, and also with all the wrestling fans who are starting to get a little bit smarter to wrestling and are just eating up all that backstage stuff, it's pretty well documented how heated it was between Hogan and Savage. And if they were able to do some business and have that match as Randy's send-off, I think it would definitely be even more of a feel-good moment for the audience. And just knowing that like Hogan and Randy like were cool, at least cool enough to have a match together. You don't have to like the person that you're wrestling, but you it's, you are a professional out there. You are going out there knowing that you are going to protect each other as best you can. And I think just having that happen would be a nice exclamation point at the end of an already very loud career.
Absolutely. And, then he can go on, be a manager, he can stick around. He can go in the Hall of Fame much earlier, and you can kind of have just a different send off for this guy. And so that's the way I see it. It seems like you've got a similar point of view here.
Yep.
We kind of, we're one of those tag teams that look like they belong together, like the Rockers, not just like where you take two random people like Marty Jannetty, Jim Neidhart. You don't have anything to do, so you guys are together right now. I felt like we're
coordinated. Yeah, we are a well-oiled machine.
We went to the same seamstress and we got the same tights for this one. So very cool. Well, we've got Macho Man booked differently. We've rebooked that career, and he got to go out on a much higher note than instead of just kind of fading away.
Yeah.
So, and we don't want you to just fade away here at the end. I want to remind people that they can hear Tough Talk with AJ Kirsch on any sort of podcast platform that they go. They can go to thetoughtalkpod.com, and they can also follow you at AJ Kirsch on Twitter, and they'll find out more about the podcast and more about you in general and what you have going on.
Yeah. Well, I always appreciate being here. If there's anything I could talk about at great length, it's wrestling. And I appreciate the plugs at the end, at AJ Kirsch on all things social media, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, it's all the same. And thetoughtalkpod.com, and you can subscribe. And I'm just getting started. There's one full-length episode out right now. And then if you like what you hear, you can also sign up for full-length bonus episodes, early and ad-free episodes, exclusive pictures and videos from Tough Enough contestants, and I actually kept a journal when I was on the show. So I plan on transcribing that and sharing that in every cringeworthy detail as well. And you can get access to all that by signing up for the Money Talks tier at patreon.com/AJ Kirsch.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being on the show, AJ.
My pleasure, man. Anytime.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. Do you agree with our booking? Would you do it differently? Well, I'm at Comedian Luke on all social media platforms, and you can actually at Rebooking TT on Twitter and Rebooking the Territory on Facebook. You can also find out about future episodes there. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and please give us a 5-star review. It truly helps.